So let's take a look at the nature of crime and victimization. In doing so, we have to decide, how is crime defined? Well, the consensus view, crimes are behaviors that are harmful to the majority of citizens. Those behaviors are defined in the laws as crimes. These laws represent the norms, goals, and values of the vast majority of society, at least in theory. I don't know that that is accurate. So in other words, we as a society agree that these behaviors should be criminal. There are three dominant views of how and why some behaviors become illegal and are considered crimes, whereas other behaviors remain non-criminal. The consensus view rests on the assumption that criminal law has a social control function, restraining those who might otherwise engage in antisocial behavior. So criminal law works to control behaviors that are inherently destructive and dangerous to society in order to maintain the existing social fabric and ensure the peaceful functioning of society. As you can imagine, this is a very structural, functional way of seeing the world. There, of course, is the conflict view. The conflict view holds that the law is the instrument that enables the wealthy to maintain their position of power and control over the behavior of those who oppose their ideas and values, or who might rebel against the unequal distribution of wealth in society. In this way of thinking, criminal law is developed by the rich to control the poor, or the bourgeoisie to control the proletariat. There's the interactionist view. This view holds that socially influential people develop and use the criminal law, i.e., they define what behaviors are criminal or non-criminal to reflect their own views. Some examples of this: legalization of marijuana. This has changed over time, as you are witnessing in your own lives, the way that we socially construct whether marijuana is legal or illegal. Some other places, same-sex marriage, of course, abortion. We're arguing whether these are moral and wrong or whether they're not. In the interactionist view, criminal law is structured to reflect those preferences and opinions of the people who hold social power, and they mold the law to reflect their own worldviews. So when we define the crime, that's a criminal law. As you can imagine, the definition of the crime changes and evolves over time, and it's social forces that mold those definitions, and how we see whether criminal law has a social control function or not. Regardless of one's views of how crime is developed, most authorities agree that crime can be defined by four factors. The formal definition of crime from the text is as follows: crime is a violation of social rules of conduct interpreted and expressed by a written criminal code created by people holding social and political power. Its contents may be influenced by prevailing public sentiments, historically developed moral beliefs, and the need to protect public safety. Individuals who violate these rules may be subject to sanctions administered by the state authority, which include social stigma and the loss of status, freedom, and on occasion, their lives. So, rather than representing commonly held values, the content of the criminal law often reflects the values of those who hold social, political, and economic power. When you think about this, do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? And as you're thinking about it, come up with some examples of crimes in the U.S. that are not crimes in other countries. And think about how social power especially social power possessed by the dominant in our society, and the dominant in our society is white, wealthy males, how they're able to structure the law in such a way that favors them. There are a few agencies and reports that we look to when we're measuring crime. The official crime data, or the FBI's Uniform Crime Reports, otherwise known as the UCR, that represents the broadest measure of reported crime. It's compiled annually by 17,000 agencies, and it calculates a crime rate per 100,000 residents. Accuracy is questionable because not all crimes are reported equally, and one of the most widely used this is one of the most widely used sources for criminal statistics. This measures how crime occurs and crime trends in an important part of the criminal justice administration. We need data to see whether the criminal justice system is working or not, and this is one of the places that we get it. There are three principal measures of crime. There's the official data, the victimization data, and the self-report data. The UCR, of course, is the official measure of crime. And historically, the UCR collected two primary statistics: the number of crimes reported to the police and the number of crimes cleared by arrest. The NIBRS, or the National Incident-Based Reporting System, is another statistical data set that gives us insight into crime in America. The NIBRS collects data on each reported crime incident. The results of the UCR are redesigned in an effort to be more comprehensive and detailed. Provides most issues facing law enforcement today. And it's going to replace the UCR by 2021. So instead of submitting statements of the kinds of crime that individual citizens report to the police and summary statements of the resulting arrest, NIBRS requires local police agencies to provide at least a brief account of each incident and arrest, including the victim, incident, and offender information. In 2015, 6,648 agencies representing more than 96 million inhabitants submitted NIBRS data. So you can get an idea of how comprehensive and how the new system is digging deeper into the questions that these systems are asking about crime. Then there's the NCVS, or the National Crime Victimization Survey. This is a survey conducted twice a year from a large sample of households. The sampling of households is selected for 3 years, and then the households are interviewed twice a year. The measures, this measures criminal victimization experiences, regardless of whether they were reported. The data is used to estimate the total amount of crime, and is considered relatively unbiased and a valid estimate. This focuses on crimes suffered by individuals and households, then estimates the proportion of each crime by type and how it's reported to law enforcement. It provides information, of course, as I mentioned earlier, about the victims, offenders, and crimes. And once again, it gives us a different perspective on how the criminal justice system distributed justice. It gives us the perspective of those who have been victimized. Something to think about. What are the differences between the three reports? Which survey may be the most reliable and why? And what type of crime would you want to look at, especially in effect to which data source you choose? Once again, when we're talking about how crime is measured, one of the ways is self-report surveys. These surveys ask respondents to reveal their criminal behaviors. This gives us information on dark figures of crime, and it's mostly used to measure crime among adolescents. Now, as you can imagine, accuracy is a concern because some respondents might exaggerate, forget, or just not talk about their criminal behavior. This type of survey can measure histories of prison inmates and, of course, drug users. But, as I mentioned earlier, the response rate is critical. And you don't know whether you can trust the information that you're being given by the people that are part of the survey. Some compatibility of these crime data sources. Each measure of crime has its own strengths and weaknesses. For the UCR, the strengths, it's carefully calculated statistics on actual crimes and numbers of arrests, and it collects data on homicides. Weaknesses, the victims of some crimes are less willing to report to the police department, and these reportings are inconsistencies between police agencies. Strengths of the NCVS, it contains unreported crime and physical characteristics of the victims. And the weaknesses are national crime data trends are based on the estimate from a sample. This does not include data on important crimes like homicide and drug offenses. And the strengths of the NIBRS provides information about the offenders. Oh, I'm sorry. The NCVS. It provides information about the offenders, and there are some concerns about the accuracy of the data. Sorry about that, folks. I got a little ahead of myself. There's some trends that we find in the UCR. Beginning in the early 1990s, the crime rate began dropping, particularly for violent crimes. Now, it might not seem this way because you see lots of reports of violent crimes, but it's actually dropping. But we are seeing a recent uptick in 2015, 2014, 16, 17, and 18 in violent offenses. And of course, trends in victimization data. Despite yearly fluctuations, victimization rates have decreased since the early 90s, and it's continuing to decrease. Self-report trends. This shows that a surprising number of teenagers report involvement in serious criminal behavior. About 1.3% of high school students said they had used force to steal. At this rate, that would account for 200,000 robberies a year. Research has identified numerous factors that influence crime trends: age structure, immigration, employment, abortion, gun availability, mental health treatment, drug use, media technology, and justice policy all play a part in these crime trends.